special day, and I'm wondering if you know why. It's my wife's birthday, and don't you let me forget it.
Yay, roast. He's everybody know roast.
That's an old house, and I kind of feel kind of fraudulent talking to you about 35-year-old technology, but you're looking at 35-year-old technology there. Built it in 1979, 80. And housing really is important because for you all, if you make the personal decision to build, it'll be your biggest decision in life, probably, other than who you're marrying and that kind of thing. But your biggest material decision. Buildings in this country use up 40% of the resources. Buildings in this country use up 65% of electricity. So building a house that I like to call a low energy house rather than a solar house, you look at that and you say, oh yes, that's a solar house. But I really always think of it as a low energy house because the really good parts of this house you don't even see, and I'm going to have to point them out because they're buried. But if someone came up to me and said, I just built a solar house, I wouldn't know what he was talking about because they're solar and they're solar. And most of the solar today is photovoltaics, meaning there's panels on the roof and they make electricity. We don't make any electricity in this house. We're plugged in, just like you all, to REMC in this case. So we make hot or warm water, hot or warm air, like me. You'll be hearing some hot air here. But this is obviously the south side in the winter. And how many here heard David Kinlock talk last hour? Half of you at least. I'm saying the same thing as he is because I believe in containment of heat rather than generation of heat. I think if I'm going to light a candle in this house, the warmth of that candle is going to stay in the house. And so in the process of building, I thought of mostly a thermos bottle. That's what I had in my head. I'm thinking of two seamless walls, insulation in the middle, no holes, no cracks, no way the heat of that coffee or hot chocolate is going to get out of that thermos bottle. So obviously my thermos bottle has holes in it because I knocked them in for windows and doors. And the doors are all insulated doors. The windows, I thought I did my due diligence in doing my research, and we got casement windows, as David Kinlock said last hour, to kind of crank out and then you can pull down your little lever and it seals it really tight. Here's the problem. 35-year-old casement windows had bad cranks. So just about all the cranking mechanisms are shot. So we have windows that sometimes work, sometimes don't. And that is the problem with casement windows. And as opposed to double hung, they used to be notorious air losers. Now they're actually making double hungs that have baffled and sealers and everything, and they're pretty good. But as he said, it's the installation that counts. You have a hole that you build as a carpenter at the right size for that window, but you have a ½ an inch of space around that hole. So you can fit it in there and you nail it in there, and then you caulk or you seal it somehow, because about half of your heat loss is out of cracks. That's called your convection air is lost through holes in the house. And then the other half is from conduction of heat that's going through solid material. Heat will go through that wall and it will go around those windows. And that's the two ways. So here I'm talking about some sophisticated technology insulation stops the conduction of heat, and this plastic, you see it wrapped around houses. I used to call it Tyvek. Well, that's just a brand name. This is another brand name, but it's a fiberglass. It's a wind stopper. It lets water vapor go through it, believe it or not, and it's a plastic, but water vapor will go through it, but it stops the wind. So caulk and Tyvek stops the convection of air, the wind leaks, and then insulation stops the conduction of air through your walls. Anyway, siding was really important. And I went to great pains to find the optimum place, and I wanted a south-facing slope, very gentle slope, facing due south. I wanted it in woods, I wanted it in the forest. And so we cut out a hole where the house was going to be built. Then 45 degrees out from the south corners, we cut a solar window so that the winter sun coming in at 8:30 in the morning and leaving at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon will come through that 45-degree solar window out that corner and out the other corner. So the long side of the house is facing south. And the trees, these are 100-year-old oak trees that just ring the place. So the sun hits the house about, in midsummer, hits the house about 3 or 4 hours a day through the hole up there. So these are our air conditioners. We don't have central air. We don't have a furnace even. But I would be going to these solar conferences way back in the 1970s, and there was always tension between the glass house people and the igloo, the Eskimo people. And the glass house people, they were all interested in getting that sun and heat into the house. And the igloo people, they were interested in small containment. And I leaned eventually toward the igloo. I was interested in thick walls, which you can't see here. But, well, I've got a picture later, but here's the difference between the normal house of 1980 was a 2x4 with that much insulation in it. And I thought, well, I can do better than that. So I got a 2x6, and I put much more insulation. Of course, there's 5.5 inches there compared to 3.5 there. And on the outside, I put 1 inch of styrofoam, and on the inside, I put plastic. You always put plastic on the warm side of the house for condensation reasons. You keep the condensation on the inside so you won't get rotten wood back there on the studs. But anyway, that was the big difference. Well, now they are starting to build with thicker walls. But I even drive around today and I see absolutely obsolete houses being built. The poor people who are going to start living there are going to be like, it's like you're looking for a Lexus and you're getting a Model T. And that's the difference in bad energy design.
You need a van.
There's our solar clothes dryer. It's the lines, it's the clothesline that we pull out like this.
And the post is there.
And there's, it pulls over to this post. That's the solar post. I've got cholesterol windows up here at the top. I built all those windows, and about 7 of them are movable. So in the summertime, we open up those windows just nonstop all summer long. But in the winter, those are both light and heaters, because the sun will go through the south side of the house all the way to the north side, hit plaster walls, and the plaster walls are like heat sinks. So believe it or not, those little windows are heaters for the upstairs. This is called a trombe, T-R-O-M-B-E, trombe, French word. And it's basically 2 layers of plastic. Behind it is a concrete wall painted black. So the sun comes in, hits that, gets soaked up by the masonry, and gives it off the heat later in the evening. These are air collectors. They're built right into the roof. In fact, they are the roof. They're not plopped on top of the roof. So basically, these stripes are extensions of every rafter. So between the 2 rafters, between every 2 rafters, I built a little shallow pan of aluminum and painted the aluminum black. And so the sun goes through 2 layers of plastic called phylon. It's a fiberglass. Hits the black aluminum. There is a fan in the basement connected with ductwork. And the cool air comes in, ductwork, all at the bottom of every one of these solar collectors. And it's pushing the air up. And there's ductwork up at the top. It heats up on the black aluminum. The warm air is taken off the top of every one of these in a series of ductwork down to the basement. And what's down here buried? It's a rock bin. A bin full of rocks. The rocks are round river rocks, about 2 inches diameter. That's about 25 tons. And during the day, like this particular winter day, all day long that heat is going down into the rocks. And then come about 7 o'clock, the house starts to cool off a little bit. We turn the thermostat on the wall. A fan will reverse this air and it'll pull it out of the rocks, going into a forced air system, just like a furnace. The forced air system takes all this solar air all night long through the whole house. So this is not high technology except for a magic little black box that I don't understand, because there's diodes and relays and wires and stuff that blink. But anyway, what it does, it carries sensor information. There's a sensor up here that says the sun has come out, the aluminum is now hot, turn on the fan. And it goes to that little box and it turns on the fan. And then another sensor comes from the thermostat in the living room, goes to the little black box, and it says the living room is cold, it needs the heat. So it'll go right from here right into the house. But if the living room sensor, the thermostat says, oh no, the house is warm enough, we don't need the heat, let's store it. It turns some damper in the ductwork, and the heat gets shunted into the box of rocks. So, and it gets stored. So basically, I say I have a solar house, it's a thermal solar house, warm air, hot air. And I have 2 kinds of solar houses. I got a passive and an active solar. Passive solar is no pumps and no fans, no electricity. Passive is architectural. So the passive part are these windows here and this little greenhouse here. And believe it or not, on Monday when it was about 22 degrees out, it was a cold, crisp, perfect solar day. These windows and this heated the house all day long. We have no furnace, and we hadn't put a stick of wood in the little wood stove since 7 o'clock in the morning. So the passive solar heats the house all day long without us touching a thing. Then when the sun goes down, we turn the thermostat up, and then we start using this heat, the active solar. So we have an active solar house and a passive solar house. The windows are the passive, and then Rose does the active work. A passive solar house requires active people, because she opens up the windows in the spring and fall at the exact time when the house needs it. She runs the house by window opening. Anyway, and pulling the shades and doing the right things. The roof overhang is really important. I learned out of a book that the sun, well, let me ask a question here. Here's 90 degrees off the horizon. Here's the horizon at 0. Where in the sky is the highest point of the sun in June? What degree off the horizon do you think? Here's 90. Here's 0.
I say 90.
90. The sun is not overhead at noon. It really is. It's at 72 degrees here. And in the wintertime, it's down to 27 degrees. It's barely over the treetops. So you've got this low winter sun. You've got the high summer sun. Okay, that's where the roof overhang has to be designed correctly. Here's the shade line at the top of the window in the winter. So the winter sun is going in 12 feet into the house and hitting mass. Everything in the house is soaking up the heat. In the summertime, that shade line is below the windows, And so there isn't a bit of sun ray coming into the house all summer. And so I tell people, I love my roof overhang. They look, send them to the loony bin, you know, because nobody loves a roof overhang, but I do. And this little thing is our heater. I say greenhouse, but we hardly have anything green in there ever. I do start my tomato plants in there, but right inside there is the kitchen, and we open up the kitchen door, open up the kitchen windows. This mass of windows is our little furnace, and that heats a good part of the house during the winter. There's Judy's rain barrels. She loves it when we point out. Fan sells these, by the way. And she personally bores the hole in and puts a faucet in and then puts glue around it.
Yep.
Our rock bin, now this is down in the basement. And this is hot air warm air comes down into what's known as a solar air mover. There's a squirrel cage fan, and there's some dampers, electrified gates on the ductwork, and it will direct the air where the thermostats tell it to. So it comes down into this rock bin, heats up the rocks, and then the same air comes up here, and by that time it's cooled off and back up to the roof, and so it makes the circle all the time. There is what I spend April and May doing with my little maul, and I split about 2 cords of wood in those 2 months. And by God, we're halfway through our wood pile, more than halfway since last November. But if I had to buy the wood, it would be about 2 cords worth, and it would be $200 to $300 for the year. I don't buy it, it's free wood and it's free labor, and I tell people I have fun doing it, and I cross my fingers when I say that. I actually do have fun for 15-20 minutes, but if I had to do it for a day, that would be work. And some people say, well, you're burning wood, you're putting carbon dioxide into the air. Well, that's true. But these are dead and dying trees. When they fall over and they start to decay, they put their CO2 into the air. So it's a natural process of a living matter that puts CO2 into the air. I'm goosing up the process a little bit faster, but it's not any more than would happen naturally. So that's what I tell myself, that's my excuse when I tell people I'm not really helping to cause global warming with my wood pile. That's the north side, that's our front entrance. It looks like a normal house. Now, windows on this side are relatively small for a reason. The windows have about 4 purposes. There are holes in the house, for one thing. There are holes in that thermos bottle, and I hate holes. So on the north side, we'll make the hole small as possible, and so on this side, we need some light to come in. We need air to vent in. We need sometimes to see out. So those are 3 reasons. But we sure won't get any sun, any heat coming in here, and I know it. Same on the east and west. The windows are a little bit larger, a little bit more glazing on east and west side, because we do get a little bit of heat in the morning, and a little bit of heat in the afternoon in October, November, and February, March. But a lot of people they look at windows as decorations. Like, oh, we'll put an equal number of windows on each side of the house, and they'll all just be the same because we want some symmetry in our design. And that's wrong. And first generation solar houses were actually too much glass on the other side, on that south side. They would make it all glass. And if you look at our Januaries, and you got 9 sunny days in the month of January, and you got 7 hours of sun in those 9 days, pretty soon you got 90% of the time, those windows aren't collecting heat, they're losing heat. So windows are heat losers, and you gotta watch how much you put on that south side. As I said, the first generation solar homes had too much glass, and what they were broilers in the summertime. They broiled people. It was really nutty. But they came up with a rule of thumb: if you're building or designing a house, you want about 30% of windows on your south side. That gives you kind of a happy medium. It gives you the heat gain, and it keeps the heat loss down. Oh, that's our interior. It doesn't show much. It's the couch where I live, and that snowy scene outside. But this broad expanse of windows, it's not a lot of window on the south side, but it does the job. It heats the house, believe it or not.
Is that the trom wall you were talking about?
This is the trom wall right here. It's painted white on the inside. On the other side is painted black. Yes. I probably have gone through it all. I thought I'd end up with the first thing, but I just wanted to say a couple things about this is old technology, and it's just, what we have to think is changing our minds. It's a mindset that this whole society that we live in is what's wrong. Because as David Kinlock said last hour, 80% of energy savings could be accomplished today with present technology. And you look at my caulk gun and my styrofoam, this is old stuff. It's just let's use it, let's use it. Now, I did want to say the worst spot on your house losing energy is your concrete from the ground level up to where the wood starts. It's about that high, where a basement window would be. Well, that's concrete. That's 8 inches of concrete. And that's about like having a pane of glass. And so air comes through between the wood and the concrete. That's the convection. And then cold by conduction conducts itself through this concrete. And it comes in the basement and then makes the first floor cold. So what I did, I put 2 inches of this around the whole basement. So this goes all the way down 8 feet and goes right up to the wood. And then you can put stucco on here if you want to, or I put some aluminum flashing just to cover it up. But this has made a big difference because any heat loss in the basement or anywhere, and heat loss, it gets contained by my thermos bottle, and the concrete then becomes a heat sink for any wasted heat energy because of this. And we'll start taking some questions now, though.
In a crawl space, would you put that in a crawl space?
You could.
I have a vapor barrier, but
Yeah. You could tack this up on the outside, the underside of the joist. If you got enough room under there, and you got an 18-year-old kid.
yeah, really. That's the part, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
18-year-old.
Try to nail it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what about, under the floor? Would you put insulation under the floor? I mean, against the floor, between the joists?
You can, as long as that the paper side is on the warm side.
Right. Okay.
This is usually it's on, you know, when you do it on the interior, you're tacking it up, and the paper is on the
That's right,
interior.
that's right.
So that's a barrier. It's a water vapor barrier, and it's got to be away. Yeah.
So you think that would help? You think that would?
Oh,
help?
any insulation in your crawl space would really help. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And crawl spaces used to have vents, and I had heard that they didn't. I heard some energy people did say that they didn't do a lot of venting. They didn't do a lot of work except letting cold air in there. So I would even think about spraying insulation on the inside of the foundation walls in the crawl space, and just sealing up that whole crawl space with some foam.
So you don't think it's necessary to have the vent there?
I've heard it both ways, that the vents didn't do that much venting, that there was, mainly it was a hole in the wall and it let cold air in. Yeah.
Well, I think you have to have some sort of ventilation or you get.
Well, mold, you mean? Mold on, you know. And that's why, that's why I saw a house that was built that had plastic laid on the ground, all the way up the walls,
Yes.
and then the walls were insulated, so
Yes.
the plastic held down any kind of mold and that kind of
So it's
thing.
like
The active part of the solar, that's fiberglass panels, are they? I thought in late you might have mentioned that. Okay, that's plastic then?
It's plastic, it's architectural plastic, yeah, it's a fiberglass, and there's 2 layers of it. They're about an inch and a half apart, and then on the other side of that is black painted aluminum.
And what's the treatment? Do you have to treat those panels or anything? Or?
I did after about 20 years, 25 years, I rolled on some liquid plastic that I got from a company in Pennsylvania, and I'm about due to do it again. Yeah. Yeah, because I didn't know how long it would last. I had no idea, but it's done pretty good in 35 years.
How well has it sustained its integrity in a hailstorm?
Hail is okay. I've had 5 or 6 branches poke through it. I've gone up and used this, something like that, and just glued a patch on it. So I'm okay patching.
Well, about that, with the trees that surround your property now being that old, what's the trimming? Do you have to do that frequently, or are they just not growing as much?
Oh, no, we trimmed one time. There was a branch that was too big and heavy and looked like it was starting to go dead, and it was hanging over the roof. And I thought, oh, troubles. So I did have somebody come and take that one down. But other than that, you know, and I look at one tree that's dying. It's got me worried. I've been looking at it for 2 years. And I'm going to have to get a professional, because I can't go up like that and lower down 10-foot sections of a big old oak tree. But that lies in our future.
David, what do you recommend for slab homes? No crawl space or basement, just
Oh, boy.
slab.
I built a double garage about 10 years ago, and one end of it was a contained, fully insulated studio. And it was a slab, but before the concrete people came, I put this stuff down on the gravel. They poured on top of this.
Okay, well, I can't do that.
You can't do that because you got the slab there. So then you have wood sitting right on slab.
Yes.
Ooh. And
And no carpet, we don't have any carpet.
You don't, and you got a cold floor, you got cold feet.
Is there a reason you can't put down the foam and put a wood floor on top of it?
Because the floor is already there. I mean, like what?
No, the floor is there, I mean, she can't get at it.
No, but a lot of times you buy your wood flooring, your slat wood floorings now, they'll put down
Right.
foam and they'll put.
Oh.
on top of it.
Right, we do
Floor.
have an insulated floor, but it's still pretty cold.
It's cold, and I don't have much of an answer for
Rugs.
that. Yeah, I don't.
It's nice in the summer.
Yeah.
It does stay pretty cool.
Yeah. And if you're burning wood, I'm really becoming particular in my old age. I will only split oak now because it splits. Hickory is, you know, the fibers on hickory are, you know, like that, and elm is like that, beech is like that. Yeah, I get lazy, you know. I can take one whack and I can split oak. It just falls apart. And that's high BTU, so I'm looking at yellow poplar and sassafras and those softer woods. Well, they're nice and they're easy to carry and everything, but you put them in the stove and they'll burn up like paper, so. I get particular about my wood.
What did you mean about the houses that are like Model Ts?
Oh, well, they're being built like they were being built 30 years ago, like my daddy built the house. They're being built out of either 2x4s, or if they're doing 2x6s, they're still building according to 1970 high bar, 1970s, 1980s. And you gotta understand that the house is gonna last 60 to 120 years. And you don't know how the energy situation is going to be. We're in a low energy blip, you know, with the shale oil and everything and the fracking. And so we have low energy, but that could last 10 years or could last 25 years, but that's still a blip to me. And so this house is going to go into high energy eras, and people are going to be miserable paying for the energy and being not comfortable. And when I said these houses are obsolete, you got to build for 2030, if you can think that far ahead. You got to build tight, a lot of insulation. You know, if I were in Minnesota and building this house, I think I would have thought of building a double wall, 2x4, bunch of insulation, and then another 2x4 wall. So two 2x4 walls with insulation in between. You got a wall like that. And David Kinlock's house was 12 inches thick, and mine are 7 inches thick. And the problem with making a thick wall is that the house, or the window people, are building their framework around their windows according to how thick the walls are going to be. I had to get people to build special framing on all our windows that would fit thick walls. And that cost extra. So if you're going to go to a super thick wall, you got to have a kind custom builder who's going to frame your windows for you. Yeah. I may have mentioned the casement windows. They are really nice and tight, and you can't beat a casement window for when you close it up and tight. But our cranks mechanically have failed, so you got to take that.
They can be replaced.
They can be replaced. Yeah.
So when you built your house, did it cost you more than the traditional home to build or less?
Well, it cost a little more. There was nothing to compare against because I have never built anything besides a bookshelf before that, so I didn't have too much to compare, and my method of building was slow because I haven't built a house before.
And you built it yourself?
I built it myself, so
Yeah.
I had help of my brother and some sons, but no professionals. And so I did build it for less, you know, like $25,000 or something. But then I had two years of work on it.
Yeah. And what is your heat bill?
Well, the chainsaw, I had to buy chainsaw oil, and I have a wheelbarrow. And the mall, yeah, that's it. We have a propane tank outside, and we cook with propane gas, and we have a closed dryer on propane gas. So it's not a heating, but we do use some fossil fuels, yes, which I don't especially like, but we do it. That in there, and I turn the heat down. I don't need 140 degree heat.
Right.
I personally need only about 115. I turn it way down, and then I put a timer on it, and that heater can only work 6 hours a day. It can only work from let's see, 5 in the morning till 8 in the morning, 5 in the evening till 8 in the evening. And so that heater element can only come on during those 6 hours. But during that time, with the insulation around it and everything, I'm containing whatever hot water we have already made. But I don't need boiling water at 2 a.m. I just don't. Who does? Mhm. And our wood stove is small. It's about as big as a chair here. And it's centrally located, and then the design of the house is open, meaning there aren't many interior walls, so that the radiant heat from a wood stove is line of sight heating. And so if you held a newspaper up against it, you're not going to get heated by that wood stove because the newspaper stops it. So the radiant heating needs open design, and that little stove does a job. So then the pipe goes straight up through our bedroom, and even though it's triple walled pipe, it still gives off heat, and the heat goes where? Right to our bedroom. So it's just fine. We have the best of all worlds down there, and then heat up there on the second floor also. Yeah. And then I said we didn't have central air conditioning. No, we don't. But about 3 years ago, we got killed by these 98 degrees days. Was it 3 years ago? Something like this. And we bought the smallest air conditioner we could find, stuck it in the window. And last year we didn't use it once. The year before we used it 9 days. We didn't use it at all that summer. And then the summer before was kind of warm. And I counted the days that the nights, at 8 o'clock at night I turned it on. And then ran it half the night. So anyway, we don't have much need for air conditioning. The nice part of those upper windows are they allow heat to escape out during the summertime. So as heat rises, if we get warm down there, oh, I forgot to tell you about another feature of the house. But as the heat rises out, it goes out these natural vents. The highest peak of the house, there's 7 windows up there, and it just flows out then. But the first floor is buried halfway into the ground. So we have a buffered home too. It's not an underground home, but the ground comes to about this level. And I thought I was making a nice warm winter house. Turns out it's a better summer house by accident, because the buffering, the 56 degrees from the ground does soak through the insulation, through the concrete, and we have the benefit of a coolish first floor all summer long. And it rarely gets warm. We do have some electric fans, and we move the air, and that's all we need is moving air. And I think it's because we're buried into the ground.
What are the physical dimensions of your rock box in the basement?
Oh, about 13 foot square and about 4 feet high.
Okay.
And it's insulated on 8 sides.
And you said you're just using regular, like, river rock, river?
I had to get special river rock. In fact, I went to a gravel place, and they didn't have it. I wanted 2.5 to 3 inch optimum size, And he said, we don't have a screen for that. I'll have to order one from Pittsburgh. I said, go do it. I said, we're going to have solar houses all over the place. So this guy, he shipped down a screen, and he screened out some big rock that can be used for landscaping, by the way. And so I got a couple truckloads of that, and I had the house half built, so I had to tear out some wall, build a little chute. I had the farmer next door get his front end loader, and he would scoop and put it on my chute, And so I had this rock bin in the basement bounded with these big river rocks. Well, I didn't have a tool to move it. So the hardest part of building that whole house was lying on my hip like this, kicking with my feet, kicking the stuff level into the corners. Because a shovel wouldn't make a dent in a big rock. And a rake, I couldn't find, nothing to me. Lying down on my hip. Yeah, that was fun. That was fun building a house. Open up the book, okay, shingles. I said, what do we do next?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.